Welcome to Corona Geek 185, Part 2. So if you guys didn't see it, last weekend, was it last weekend or weekend before last? I get lost.
Yeah, it was just last weekend.
Okay.
Not this yesterday, but the weekend before.
And by the time somebody watches this, it's going to be, who knows. But recently, Michael and his crew submitted an entry to Ludum Dare, and it's called The Mimic. Now, what was the theme for this particular Ludum Dare? And
it was shapeshift.
Here.
There he is. He's back. Okay, it was shapeshift. Yeah. And so you guys came up with a creative, a very stylized. You seem to have between Golf Squad and the Mimic, you seem to have defined yourself a certain style of graphics. So just talk about the whole thing.
Yeah. So talk about the whole thing. Yeah, that's it. I was born and raised in Kentucky. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so we've been doing game jams for a little while now. So Pony Wolf proper, this company that I have, has only been in business for about just a little over 2 years now. Before that, I lived in New York and had a company called NO2 Games, which kind of goes all the way back to the late 90s. I'm going to date myself here. And we did PC CD-ROM game development for a little company called E-Games, if you guys remember the good old days of buying CD-ROMs at Walmart and Target and those kind of places. And then went from that to doing kind of online code development for Electronic Arts as a contract studio. We did graphic subsystems for their Java ports of games. And it was back then that I started getting in these game jams because I'd have the concept of like, oh, I want to experiment with an idea, but I don't necessarily want to break my current code base to do it. So let's just go and jam on a feature that we would like to bring to all of our games. And then that gives us kind of a fresh slate to kind of concentrate on that. And so, so I think in the past 2 years, we've done 4 game jams. 3 Ludum Dares, and the indie speed run that we did not too long ago, which we were lucky enough to be a finalist in. So for this one, we knew before we were even going to go into it that we wanted to experiment with randomly generated things. We had seen a lot of there's a roguelike jam that we didn't have time to do. There's all this procedurally generated level content and, all this other kind of stuff. And, we knew in some of our other games that we were doing, we were having performance issues because the way we build our maps, we kind of build the whole map and we load everything in. So our maps can only be so big. And we said, oh, it'd be really cool to put some randomly generated grass in our map and have the grass that goes off the left side of the screen pop up on the right side of the screen. Kind of like some of that object caching that you guys were talking about in one of the other things. So so we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know if it was going to be a platformer, if it was going to be more of a Legend of Zelda thing, or whatever. But we knew that was one of the things that we kind of brought to ourselves. No matter what the theme is, we're going to try to do something random. The way Ludum Dare works, they announce a theme Friday at 5 o'clock Eastern, so it's 7 o'clock Mountain Time when we are, and I guess 8 o'clock on the West Coast. You have to incorporate, well, you don't have to, but you're encouraged to incorporate that theme to get people to vote on what you're doing, and that keeps people from kind of working ahead early on storyline and things like that. So you can tell people who really incorporate the theme into their game versus people who kind of just make a game and then attach the theme on at the end. So then you have, for the Ludum Dare compo, which are individuals, have 48 hours. Teams have 72 hours. So we get all the way from Friday at 7 till next to the following Monday at 7. Yeah, and there's the little game. And so, yeah, so that's just kind of the general concept. And we talked about spine in the last show. This is the little character that we have there is a spine animation. We do little tricks like, the arms and the gun, and really, almost everything of him is kind of unattached, so we can move everything kind of freely and have him kind of walk around. Actually, I'll pull up the game. I'm just tired of talking, and you see, I'll share my screen here. And,
live action is always
yeah. Let's see.
Well, I want to say while you're pulling that up, first of all, it runs on Windows and Mac, right? Windows, Mac, and Android.
Windows and Mac. We didn't bother doing an Android build. We have to build some on-screen controls, but
and you have keyboard support and also controller support built in, which is fantastic. So if you download this onto your Mac and play it, I highly recommend, if you have a controller, to use that, as well as the keyboard.
I'll go ahead and pull the code up in the background. We can, so anyway, yeah. So like I said, we have these little keyboard controls, and you'll see a little bit of the easing. So when the character goes from his run to his stop, you see him kind of pull the little rifle he has back up. If he shoots, you see the rifle kind of come out and pull away. Those are all just kind of spine tweens that happen automatically just by telling it to go from one animation to the other. We have a little trick that we use all the time for jumping, where this character is not really jumping. It just his spine's getting drawn higher up the screen. And his shadow's expanding a little bit, and that gives you the idea that he's jumping. If I were to zoom in here and put the physics on, you can see this little pill shape that kind of controls the physics of this guy. When I jump, the physics doesn't move, it's just his character moves. And then we can do some tests inside the game. If you get a rocket fired at you and you're in the middle of jumping while the rocket comes by, then we just do a contact equals false on that collision, and it looks like you jumped the rocket, even though you're not really doing any of that. These big physics boxes that you see here are triggers. So when the hero character goes and touches those triggers, you get the dialogue boxes that pop up. And these dialogue boxes kind of drive the story along. And I'll show kind of how this is set up. We'll go hop in and play the game. This big dialogue, or the big trigger that you see here, and there are triggers that load up a new map. Let's go in. And
I'm glad you're showing that, because there's often times when I have those moments where I'm like, how did they do that? How did they accomplish that particular piece of it?
Yeah, so I'm going to shoot these guys up here. So, in this particular situation, this is all kind of randomly generated. So it's just a series of ones and zeros that get rooms cut out. I'm actually cheating. I'm using a library called ROT Love, which is a port of a JavaScript library called ROTJS, which basically has a lot of the roguelike functions built into it. You ask it to build a room and give it some parameters, and it returns a bunch of ones and zeros. That's like ASCII code for what the room looks like. We just take that ASCII code and turn it into actual images. Let's see if I can find one of our, okay, so here's our landmines here. So these just have a particle system attached to it. And the particle system is similar to the way the character jumps. It's not really, I'll just hit it. These particles really don't jump in the air and bounce around. They're actually on a bounce transition, and they kind of just go out, but it just looks like you have all that additional kind of almost 3D stuff associated with them. I just killed my character.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out, Mike, that little visual trick you did on the particles there was genius, because I had me sort of like scratching my head for a minute and go, okay, I know that he doesn't have any physical interaction going on there. He's doing something. What is it exactly?
Yeah, it looks really good. Like just, you know, it just generates some particles, right? And so some of these particles are
It really gives
physics-based.
implied depth to your screen.
Yeah, you can see the physics particles here on the bottom, right? So they're just moving. It's the part. It's the what's visually seeing of the particles. It's kind of bouncing up and down, and the shadow kind of just attaches it to the ground and makes you feel like, you know. I mean, a perfect example is I jump, but I don't hit that guy because my physics never hit him. But when I do that, then I get it. So anyway, so that's the game in a nutshell.
Wait, I wanted to interrupt you one more time. I'm sorry.
Okay.
In your example there, you had several bits with text. That was that module you released, right?
It is that module I released, although we've had a lot of people complain that they don't see the text. If you look at some of the things, and I worry that the snapshot texture, since I'm making kind of an odd size snapshot texture, that maybe not every PC video board supports it. So in the latest version.
That's the thing, man. You release something into the wild and people go, hey, I can't do it. It's not working for me. You're like, it's been working for me.
Well, and to me, that's kind of great. Because I'd much rather have that stuff tested. I mean, it's amazing how much code I pulled over from this game jam and shoved back into our regular projects because somebody said, oh, well, this didn't work and that didn't work. We fixed it. Also, people doing video playthroughs of the game, those are invaluable to us because you know, we can actually see people interact with the thing and see bugs and see things that aren't working. So what we're looking at here is tiled. If people haven't seen it before, it's what's supposed to be a tiled map editor, right? So you're supposed to be able to kind of put down, you know, old kind of PC chips, is what they used to call them, and build levels for games using you know, using little square pieces that fit together perfectly and interact and all that other kind of stuff. Tiled's come such a long way lately that when we do games now, we actually have just a series of objects that we use for, where are we here? A series of objects that will drop into the game. And then we'll build interaction and display around them. So that whole screen that we were looking at before, the character kind of ending up here and running and talking to this character and then eventually exiting the game over here, there's just absolutely zero coding involved in that. It's all, let me turn off these light layers. It's all just interacting with these boxes here. These are physics boxes, so it keeps the character from walking into those pieces. Even our help are just you know, little signs that we built and tossed in.
So you're really using this as almost like a level editor.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're using it as. And I mean, you know, we could do 3 whole shows on how this kind of works, but if I hide kind of, you know, I'm trying to hide everything but the game layer, you know, you have this, you know, concept of this hero here. And basically what this hero is a class in our game. So if I go to his properties, and this will look a lot like, you know, what people have seen in Flash for years and years and years. I'm picking this, you know, hero image here, and I'm assigning a name as hero. And then I'm just saving him in the map. We have our NPC guy who lives over here. His name's or his type is NPC. He's a giver. And in this particular case, I have a spine file associated with him as his only property. The way we kind of use tiled is we replicate these properties over to the game. So if you change the width of this character to 180, let's say, it'll stretch him out. That property will carry over to the character in the game, and he'll just be wider than he was. If I go in and create create something that Corona knows about, right? So alpha is something it knows about, and if I were to reduce this to 50%, then this character would be at 50% opacity in the game. So anything that you put here, blend mode, anything that a display object will know will automatically get added to that display object inside the game. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around at first, but it really makes it easy to build, really interesting things. So all these cool lighting effects that you guys are seeing is literally just a layer of these little orange spheres, kind of orange and purple spheres kind of laid over top of each other. And if you go into their properties, their blend mode set to screen. So they kind of, enhance what's there rather than do anything. So so somebody's asking, how do you do these things this quick? It's like, it's all cheating. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Now, I have a question. Were those physics boxes that you were showing, were those created in tiled?
Yeah, so basically, we do everything kind of through this typing system. So if I go to my physics layer here, but turn it on and off so you can see these are all the things that are on this physics layer. If I touch this object, go to its properties, layer, turn my lights off here. This little box here, which I can control in tiled, has a property associated with it of type physics, and then our code reads that type and basically assigns the physics body to that piece. Yeah, in fact,
shows that you were talking about.
Yeah, Tiled has really, really cool tools. If you go to view, let's see where it is, our tile collision editor. I can actually go into an object like this. We were working pretty quick, so we just put those boxes there, but I could go in and draw real physics around that. And everything that Corona supports, right? So I could put up to 8 bodies associated with any one thing, and this would give this kind of perfect physics around here. And that would pre-populate actually to everything inside the game that used this one piece.
Wow.
And that's again another subject for another time.
Cool.
But it allows me to do things like I could grab my hero and move him from here to here. Actually, I'm going to back out all these changes so I don't break anything. But I will go in and just to show you how that works, I'm going to highlight our hero. I'm going to move him over to here, and I'm going to make sure all my layers are back on, and I'm going to save. Now when I go back into the game, and we start it, my character now pops up over here rather than over there because his X and Y coordinate got passed along.
Nice.
So that makes it really quick to be like, oh, well, I don't want to have to run from the beginning to the end every time. I don't quite know where I'm going. I'll just move my hero to that next piece.
I had a question.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, in your artwork, okay, so you did all this in tiled. One thing I noticed that I also puzzled over was your Z depth. So you got like the plants there, the stalks with the leaves, and you automatically get the right Z.
Yes, so that took me forever to do, and it's probably the worst performing piece of this. So we have a function called sort. Actually, let me just go to the outline mode here. It takes a map fact, it can all fit on one screen probably. Basically this map and layer, basically just, this is a parent that holds all the layers of the map. And I created these two little, I shouldn't say I created them, I think just sorting functions. And I basically load in all the children of a layer and I pump them through this left to right, up to down. And if that object happens to have a spine associated with it, I treat it, its group like that piece, and I push everything to back. And this happens 60 frames a second.
So just so I understand the question here, Ed, you're saying that he's automatically generating these things on the screen and they need to be on top of each other in the proper order.
Yeah, so look how, like, I'm in this little group of thistles here.
Yeah. And
this thistle right here is kind of in front of me and this one's behind me.
Yeah.
But if I go above it, this one automatically comes in front of me.
Ah, gotcha.
Like I'm passing through these things. And I'm doing that by basically sorting this entire map from bottom to top, left to right, and pushing those images to back.
Okay.
In fact, this is what I was talking to the guys at Corona about was, hey, is there an easier way for me to get to that Z depth so we could... so we could do this a little bit more automatically, like put everything that's on this line at a certain Z and that line.
Yeah, I've tried this in different ways. You guys probably did too.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that you did it on a PC, but I'd love to see the performance on a mobile device.
It's good. Because we're only doing this one layer, right? So we're only doing these objects that I'm flashing here. Mm-hmm. So it's really not that bad.
No, it's not. It's less than 100 objects per frame, so easy.
Yeah, and another optimization, which I keep planning on doing, is only doing the ones that are on screen rather than doing the ones that are there. I mean, it's kind of weird because you can zoom so quickly in this game. You can kind of zoom in and out that all of a sudden, all these objects are on screen.
Yeah, as long as you're on screen, test doesn't start to dominate the comparison.
Yeah,
on screen,
it's just kind of interesting piece where you're kind of walking through, I'm behind front of this rock and behind the rock. You can hide behind things.
It looks great. I got to tell you, that was the first thing that jumped out at me when I started running it. Was like, sweet, very nice.
From a player's perspective, how did you use Zoom?
I'm just mouse wheeling.
Okay.
We didn't finish. This game's way not finished, but I'm just mouse wheeling to zoom in and out. Okay. Because physics doesn't scale well, like your hybrid physics mode doesn't scale. I always tend to leave the mouse wheel to the zoom, so that way you can see the one-to-one physics, so we make sure things are lined up. So the next little piece of this is so that's great for doing these kind of pre-done levels, but how are we doing random stuff? And that's kind of similar as well. So this is one of these random levels inside the game. So I'm doing kind of the same thing. I'm putting enemies and objects in. I'm actually assigning properties to these objects. How many health do you get for one of these? These landmines are a type landmine. And then what we're doing is we're iterating around how many of these objects we have, how many of these objects we have, how many of these we have, the hero and the exit, and just kind of randomly putting them in places on the map. And when that's done, we have layers here that are random layers. So this layer here, stumps, which it's not on screen because it's not there, but if we go and look at its properties, it's a random image that gets assigned to that layer. And we want 10 stumps. So 10 stumps show up inside the game. If I go to pebbles, same thing. We get 50 pebbles, and they're on those layers. And I mean, really cool and tiled. You can kind of change the order of layers. pretty easily just by going up and down. And since we load these JSON files in bottom up, just like everything else, you're actually changing where things are showing on the map.
And what's the deciding factor between having the stumps in a JSON file versus having the enemies that you visually represent on the screen?
Yeah, instancing is, so I have to have 6 copies of these villains because I need an instance for each one, because they all have their own health associated with them and whether they're shooting or not shooting. I probably could have done the landmines because they're either there or they're not. But again, like when you're doing on these game jams, you're not really thinking too hard. You're just trying to get stuff kind of out there.
So essentially, if you're going to interact with, if the hero is going to interact with some object in some way, then you're instancing it. Otherwise, it's just some random object that's on the screen.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing too with some of these random things, their objects are cached, so they'll move from one side of the screen to the other. So they're not in. So if I can go back to the game here, and the easiest place to see it will be in that main, the main menu here. If I go up to the top, zoom all the way out, you see these kind of guys living in the background here. Those are instance, so you'll notice that these 2 guys are here, and when I go to the other side, they're now all of a sudden over here. And that's just to give that scrolling concept from one side to the other. So these couldn't be physics objects. They couldn't have any sort of interaction with them because they kind of move based on the screen scrolling.
Gotcha.
And this guy was the sun was kind of off as well. I don't know why he originally popped up there, but it just gives you a little bit of an idea of, and it gives the game a little good feel, just having different layers moving at different speeds, and that's pretty easy to do. Because we're just treating this whole map as one, like a table of layers, and the layers have kind of ways to move independently. It's really easy to see when you kind of pick up the level and move it, how some things are moving faster than others. And then for the maze, basically the levels, that ends up being on this layer, and we had to kind of write, a bunch of stuff for this. So, so we basically are giving it a directory that has all the wall images in it. Let's see if my finder is up. Where I have that. So we have, these, no, where are they? Maps, random. So we made these kind of random images, this front wall, the top of the thing, and then the back. And that's just, this directory points to where those images are. And then I guess I should talk about Rot Love a little bit. So here's the module. But basically, pull up the game layer. What happens here is you can call this one simple function here, and it returns a table, a matrix table that has zeros and ones, zeros being kind of walkable and ones where walls are. And then you can use that to kind of build a map. These are kind of traditionally tiles. And it's really cool, really fast. You have a lot of different kinds of maps you can build. You can build random, you can build things that look like forest, things like that. But it's all just kind of geometry. It's no graphics associated with it. And then we kind of, check and see if things are left or right or above or below, and then try to pick the right image and add physics associated with it. So it kind of turns, turns a bunch of ones and zeros into a map. Good way, interesting way to kind of play with it. JS. So it's a Lua port of this library. And they have this really cool interactive manual. So we go to dungeon creation here. Basically by getting this, kind of rooms function, it'll generate a map and show you where all the doors are if you want to put doors in. They have this digger style map, which does a pretty similar thing. And all it's really doing for you is kind of telling you, what blocks are solid and what blocks aren't. And it's up for you to kind of draw the map associated with it. You can give it a random number, a random seed, and kind of do, all kinds of really cool procedurally generated content. And all we're doing is putting a display object down if we get a 1, and we're not putting a display object down if we get a 0, and then we're adding physics to that display object. It was really relatively quick to do that part, which is why we got to focus a little bit more on doing some niceties around the animation and stuff.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. I'm seeing a lot of code here on the screen. Not just the raw JS, but on in your zero brain there. I mean, it's one thing to drag these objects out onto the screen and do sort of a level editor, sort of quick and dirty layout. But it seems like there's a lot of code base there that you're kind of flipping through, and it's old hat to you. But in terms of Ludum Dare, how much of that do you bring to the table in the beginning, and how much of it do you write on site?
Yeah, so let's look at that. So I wanted to pull that up just to kind of show, kind of what we're doing. So, this is our first commit of the game. I don't even know if this is going to run, but we'll see it. So this is what we had going. As part of just frameworks, right? So we have our tile map loader. We have, I don't know if I'm losing you guys there. This is it. Like, this is, no jumping, no anything, just a little display rectangle on the screen. But our code library includes, so that doesn't exist anymore. None of those exist anymore. If I kind of close this up and let it refresh, the real big thing, which we kind of consider our bread and butter here, are these, these kind of pre-done libraries. So the Corona Labs library has just things that we've gotten out of the forums, Rob's device detection, which we don't even use in this game, game math, which I don't think we used, proxy functions, which I don't think we used. The spine libraries are in here. And then a relatively just kind of short bit of our internal tools, right? We have that PEX loader, which is freely available that people can get to. This physics particles, which is basically just kind of like a PEX loader, but just puts physics on the particles. We have our pointer library, which is just mouse pointer routines for doing PC stuff. Our font library, ability to save settings. And some of these are loaded in and some of these aren't. Like, I think in the beginning, we don't really have too much included. And then, we do just nice things, right? So we have a main Lua, a build settings, and a config Lua, where I just cut and paste the documentation out of the Corona site. So, like, I don't want to have to remember what application content is, or the different ways of doing it. So I just kind of have that, that stuff pasted in. So it looks like a lot of code, but it's kind of just, what we consider, our framework
It's interesting. That's a great idea to kind of copy in the options that you most commonly are going to want to reference.
Like I completely stole this idea from Apache. So if anybody's configured an Apache server,
right,
like paste all the content into their HTTP config. And so we have a main and that has all the physics stuff. This isn't code per se. This is just a quick and dirty way for us to do that. And then some of the things like, showing that physics, just by hitting a key, like this just goes into all of our projects. We, if the simulator's there, we have a key event listener that looks for the P key. If the P key gets pressed, then we go to hybrid mode. If not, we go to normal mode. And we use a physics.show variable to kind of, do that. So, I think there's something to, having a, like all of those things that you're going to do time and time and time and time and time again, ready to go in a framework where you can go. I mean, it's exactly like the super starter kit. There's nothing in here that's necessarily particular to a game. If I were to just go in and set the gravity for the game to 9.8, all of a sudden this becomes a platformer style. Maybe. Did I not save that? I might have it get reset someplace else. But anyway, so you can set these things just to kind of get you to where you want to go. And then there's so much stuff that's done just in the map loading, right? So that these don't exist anymore.
So then more just kind of to come back around to that the original question there. It's like then Ludum Dare, you can sort of show up with your hammer and your saw and all your tools, and then begin to build your thing. You don't have to necessarily have to start from absolute zero.
Oh yeah. If you're doing the jam, you have to, you can bring whatever you want to. And there's no source code release requirement, so you don't have to bring anything. If you're doing the competition, which is that 48-hour event, that's much stricter rules. You can only, in fact, you can still use libraries, but you can only use libraries that are publicly available. So if I wanted to do the compo, I would have to release all this stuff on GitHub prior to the competition. And I mean, Spine is so fast to use. By 12 a.m. on that first night, we've got this guy kind of running and shooting. And those spine files are ready to go in the game. So replacing that little orange block with this guy, all of a sudden we have a guy kind of running around and doing his thing.
Those are hilarious. I love it.
Yeah. So same thing. And it's the nice thing about Spine is once you get those animations done, you just swap out your graphics for the head and the body and all those things. So going from this character to this character is just, redrawing the heads and laying them over top of the same Spine file. So it's the same Spine JSON that executes against these other things.
So I like so stop right there. You've got the character, the top one there, right? So his head has this slight, almost 3D feel to it.
Yeah. So in this particular situation, that black part of his face mask is separate as a separate object. So we can turn that independently. So think of it as just more parallax. His head tilts and moves a little bit differently than the rest of his body. Same with his hands. This is where I talked about things not being connected. Like we use a lot of the IK stuff, but a lot of the stuff we turn off because you don't want these rigid kind of characters that are all connected and how their bones are moving. We want a little bit more cartoony. In this particular case, like this character here, those hands here aren't even connected to his body. They're just floating around in space. So that gives us a little bit more expression that we can do. When we want to have kind of recoil on that gun that doesn't necessarily move arm bones and elbow joints and things like that. It's really, Yeah, it's just really, I don't know, it's cheaper to do too, right? So when you don't have to IK out a whole character, you're just IKing out. In this particular case, it's just a torso and legs and a head. I mean, there's probably 4 bones associated with that whole guy.
And the simpler solution is probably, the more elegant way to go anyway. It just in terms of it, as you said, it's cheaper. It gets the same effect without all the overhead.
Yeah, and so then we start looking for some inspiration of what we want the guy to look like, and start talking about some of that stuff. And Art kind of goes off and does that as the code's getting built.
So who did the spine animations then? Is that
so James Lloyd, he's done our art for past year and a half. So local guy here, and does a lot of different things, comic book illustrator, and things like that. But so another thing too, when you talk about putting together everything that we have around, there's really not a lot in here that we did, but we have, when we have particle systems and things like that inside a tiled, we really have just very simple pieces that look for an instance inside the tile map, like a block or an image, and just replace it with other stuff. In this particular case, this just one little code snippet, looks through an entire map, looks for something called, particle, and replaces it with a PEX file, which is which is a particle system. It just becomes really, really easy to do that. Another trick that we use, which is also just, again, like something quick and down and dirty, for sound effects, we have a great little app called BFXR. And basically this just makes it's another random content generator. It just makes random sound effects for games. So when we are ready to go and I want to pick up coin sound, I just press it until I hear one that's like, oh, that's the one I want. Then I can save this to disk as a WAV file and so all the sounds in the game are all made with this, and took maybe all of about 10 seconds to kind of blow out. And then if we had time, we go in and tweak them a little bit more. But this is a real easy way to get to, and again, just some pre-done code instead of then going in and loading them in off disk. Our main Lua has those default names for BFXRs already kind of programmed in there. So I just have to drop in a directory of WAV files and they're all ready to go. And I know that when I play match or shoot or jump, that those sounds will be there, or they're air out until I put a sound there with that name.
Random question for you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Your sound manager, do you use events or do you do a direct call to the module?
I use GG, what's the Glitch Games has that sound library that he released. I started with that and kind of hacked it up to kind of do the stuff that we need to do. But it's just a table. Those sounds get loaded into a table and then the table gets played out.
Okay. Just curious, different people, different folks, different strokes on handling how code, is done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because, I worked on, when we worked on NBA Escape, which was a pretty big game, we used almost completely different libraries than what we had here. We used all the stuff from Crawl Space Games, because those guys, their new company was working on it as well. We did a lot of audio work there that, I'm having to redo now because that was kind of all done in Moonscript, and it was a very kind of complicated project, but like some of the thinking about how to kind of like preload sounds and do stuff quickly, we kind of brought into here. yeah, like I feel like I've kind of complicated things more than kind of shown a light on them. There's just so much of the stuff that we do now that just kind of baked into tiled, and like, our tiled library does, a lot of the heavy lifting as far as like building a world and putting, physics around that world and stuff that, it's hard to kind of even, kind of communicate like how we would go in and do it. Like this whole structure here, on the left-hand side, like art is just, where we kind of keep art files that are work in progress. And you can see this is kind of shrinking up as I'm clicking around on it because I switched to that early branch. So there's not as much stuff in this branch. But, you have sound effects and, a scene library where we have, like these will start to pare down as well. Where we have kind of, these are all kind of part of tiled. So we have our, collision library and explosion library and, our platformer library, which, this platformer library sounds like, oh, well, it's like a platformer game built into a library, but it's not really. It's just little helpful functions around clamping velocity on objects and, knowing if an object's in motion or not. Asking an object to move to an X and Y coordinate at a particular velocity. Passing two objects to this function will make one object follow another object. And these are all things that kind of get called in an event listener, or not an event listener, an interframe listener around an object. This is one that we use all the time. This pill shape, which basically returns a physics shape that's that pill, for lack of a better term, kind of a stop sign around an object based on its content width and content height. So instead of it being a square and instead of it being a circle, we have something that looks more like this, like a stop sign with corners. And that really makes objects kind of freely kind of go around corners, and you feel like they can clip a corner a little bit, without being kind of a big square or a circle. Or
it gets rid of that ugly corner catching nonsense.
Yeah. And it causes them to kind of glide smoothly around things. So, so this module, like these modules are, I don't know, invaluable to, having, character. Let me fast forward a little bit in the...
While you're doing it, I want to ask this question, and this goes out to both you, Michael, and you, Ed. Have you guys ever considered creating a cookbook?
One of the issues that I have with, and I'm finding this now with, that stroke text module that I put out, and then we had a bitmap font module that we put out. Until things get used in 2 or 3 projects, they're really not ready for public consumption, right? We're a 2.5 person company, and it's really, really tough for me to make games and do all the other stuff that I'm trying to do, and support and bug fix kind of libraries on top of it. And it's not that I don't want to do it. In fact, I kind of mentioned in the last thing that I feel like I'm not a very good community member because I don't kind of kick out as much source code as I probably take in. But with this tiled library, I was getting, a couple of requests a day between the GitHub and the forum that we had on Corona Labs, and the fact that I was working with another team of people to do a game that had questions on the fact they were doing. I was spending all my time kind of supporting these libraries, which I think is really tough. What I'd love to be able to do is to get these things out into the open source and have a community of other people that come in and take care of it. And in fact, Tiled's a perfect example of, I put it out there. Caleb, I don't remember Caleb's last name off the top of my head.
Caleb Place.
Yeah, the gimbal coding guy. His Dusk engine is basically an early fork of all the stuff that I have entiled here. And you can see, like, he's just on the forums all the time, knocking it out. Like, people are asking questions and doing that. He's really done a really good job of supporting that engine. And I think to put together like a cookbook, or to take this framework and kick it out, like, I'm just thinking about it after talking to you guys. Like, if I were to kick this framework out, I think everybody would go, what? Because you need to get, spine, and you need tiled, and you need 15 other tools to kind of put it all.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not really thinking so much about the holistic aspects of things. Like you see it as a bigger picture there. I'm talking about something like, just a moment ago you were saying, hey, this piece of code, makes one object follow another object, or you had that, hey, this region triggers an event where this shows the dialog box. It just seems like there was moments where people come in. I see the common question that I see a lot is people are like, how do I make my character jump? And those are just like those moments where somebody comes in and answers it on the forums or whatever, but it seems like that's almost like, a cookbook material where it's like, common questions like, how do you make a character run? How do you make a character jump? How do you make a character stand on a platform? Those types of things.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I think one of the places that starts is, we adopted this for NBA, where we kind of put all of our third-party libraries in a COM folder. And then all of a sudden it became really easy to kind of find everything, and everything had a kind of a consistent naming function. So I wanted to show the hero, I'm always calling either COM Pony Wolf my spine wrapper, or COM Pony Wolf sound manager, or scene game collisions, like this consistent naming structure. If we could start getting people who are putting together some core libraries for the community to kind of follow the structure, all of a sudden it becomes pretty easy to say, because this is a perfect example of, in fact, my spine wrapper is out on the forum somewhere. I posted it out a while back. I haven't made a GitHub page for it, but to use it, it's looking for the esoteric software in a COM esoteric spine Corona and spine Louie directory, which isn't the exact way that the esoteric people released theirs. They released it so it all have, the Corona file sits in the user directory. So basically, for me to kind of ship out anything that I would do around spine, or help somebody out and say, hey, here's how you would make a spine character jump or control that, I'd have to retrofit a little bit of what we're doing, or go and convince those guys to like, hey, pick a package naming structure for your packages, which like Lua Rocks has done. I mean, it's possible, right? So I mean, Lua Rocks is a perfect example of how to get that stuff in there. Yeah, so it's kind of
okay.
But when you look at this hero class, like, everything happens in this hero class for this game. So everything that you kind of see on screen right now, the character running around, there's obviously no enemies or no physics or anything. He can walk off the screen kind of indefinitely and kind of come back. This is, let me see if I can find a time frame for it. So this was the next day at about 2:30 is where the game sat. At this stage, this isn't too hard to think about, right? I mean, like, all the key press, button, joystick stuff, like everything, the spine file getting loaded, the character winning, dying, playing a new spine animation is all kind of in this same, 300 lines of code. So it's not overly complicated to kind of talk about to people, or put together like a little tutorial to be like, oh, okay, here's how you go and do it.
Yeah.
I would like just to interject. You say that it's pretty simple, or that it's easy to understand. But I can tell you from my standpoint, I come from an art background and not a code background. And as soon as you start splitting off, all these different things, and you're calling out to them, and to a non-coder, I generally get it, but it becomes, my head starts to spin, and it takes me a long time to get my head wrapped around exactly what's going on here and where you're jumping from here to there. And so I think from anybody from, mid-level up, this is going to, I think what you're saying is right on. I think this is, people will jump into this, like somebody like Ed would just be like totally all over this situation, and get it and fall right into it. But from my standpoint, this would be, I look at this and I think this is really cool, and I kind of start to understand it, but for lower end users, programmers who don't have that depth of knowledge and don't typically program this way, I'm a more linear programmer.
Yeah, and some of this stuff is self-contained, right? Like the example before of this piece of code makes object A follow object B. That's kind of self-contained, and it doesn't need to be, it's not dependent on another piece of code. It's not dependent on another concept. But some things like how do I make a platformer, right? If you're kind of like, how do I make how do I randomly generate my platforms? How do I make a character be able to jump through a platform? How do I make a character be able to jump from platform 1 to platform 2? Now you start getting into some more, again, kind of concepts, as opposed to just being able to kind of plop the code out there and say, hey, here's the code that makes that happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that there's this kind of, and I hate to use the term kind of pro coding, because I think that that's a misnomer. But there is this kind of, I don't know, standardized or something where, using like, if teaching people the basis of like putting code in a source code repository and keeping things in packages and making modules that instance themselves and inherit other pieces are so crucial to being able to do things quickly. So it's almost like a lot of pain early to get to, help. And I look at, what's his name? Kurt Beige, Simple Machine. Do you know those guys?
Yeah.
When he and I were in New York at the same time, and we were talking about kind of working on a project together, and he's an amazing, designer and game designer and programmer, but like all of his Corona apps are like one file, like it's main Lua, and like it's everything in there. And it's amazing like what he does with that, right? I mean, he makes some really, really killer stuff. So I'm not going to tell, Kurt, like, oh, you're not programming right. Like, you're not programming correctly, right? Because he's doing fine. Like, if his code runs and people buy it, like, however you want to do it, and that's the magic of Lua as well, right? However you want to do it, you're able to do it.
Well, even between you and say Ed has, you mentioned before SSK, and I think Ed, you've tried to create it as a holistic library, whereas Michael, when I'm looking at your code here, you've kind of segmented out pieces of functionality by files. You've put, hey, all of these things that are related to, like you were saying, like before, platformer, they're all in this file. So you've kind of broken it out that way, and that's kind of your library methodology.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the more you put into it, so I'll blow everybody's mind here for a little bit. So the more you put into it, the more stuff you can kind of get out of it, right? So this is Time Golf Squad, which is the other project that we're working on. And, there's the same kind of scene. Well, where would he be here? Scene game. So, because it's a little bit bigger project, Hero. And this hero has got a lot of the same stuff in it, right? It's the same collision, same other stuff, same localized math variables, maybe some different, things in the front, but, a lot of the same, physics and, all of that pieces, but the game couldn't itself be more different. Let's restart it here, to where, obviously there's a lot of additional stuff, but let's try this one. But here is, it's a similar kind of map setup, but, this is a, kind of a turn-based golf game. In this particular situation, these little conveyor belt pieces are other pieces of individual code that could go and live in other places. And just to show, like, kind of how crazy you can get with this stuff. Let's see if I can bounce back out. Like, we can build, so everybody's faces are on top of my toolbar down here. We can take this exact same code base here that's running this, Time Golf Squad, that, the basis of that is in there. And, I just made a different map inside of Tiled, and we have a full kind of pinball game that, it's all the same code, all the same stuff, just kind of packaged into a different package. So all the collisions, all the physics layers, all that stuff that we had before, it's kind of a completely different game. Let me see if I can go and open. I'm on my laptop here, so I don't quite have everything, but I should have, but ignore that stuff. So yeah, we have here just a pinball table laid out and tiled. And, the only difference in code between this and that golf game is there's some physics pushing down on the golf ball. But we have a similar kind of approach. By going to my layers, I have these green physics layers here. We looked at the tile collision editor. So these pieces here have collisions associated with them. So there we go. All of this stuff is, relatively similar. It's all kind of coming from one ginormous kind of this ability to load in tile and bring in anything that comes with it. So it's starting, I don't know, it feels a little bit like Flash to me. It feels a little bit like Unity to me. But it's, just the ability to assign and set properties to things inside a game. These little pivots here are just the same. I mean, this will all look pretty familiar to anybody who's worked in physics. So I can just go and create a pivot and set all of the Corona properties on it. Pick a target that it's associated with, and that hooks this flipper up to that pivot.
But as you say, your code base, underlying code base is the same. You just, if a game needs an additional bit of tweaking, you add that to that project.
Right. I mean, so the source code for this pinball table might only be 200, 300 lines long, because so much of the other stuff is baked into those the libraries that load in things out of Tiled.
You mean the unique code?
Right, yeah, so the unique code. And so I kind of consider the rest of that stuff just part of it's not a library, it's more of a framework, right? Because you're not including these things in, it's just something that kind of brings pieces in. So, and I think it would be great if, and where I'd love to get to is to kind of release Tiled maybe as a plugin for Corona, like so my Tiled loader, and have all of these other things, like bringing in a physics piece or bringing in a joint or bringing in a platformer hero as either plugins or libraries associated along with that. Because then I do think it would be easier for kind of the novice coder to go in and say, okay, well, I'm going to draw my platforms, and I'm going to call those physics, and I'm going to put my platform hero there, and he's got the enter frame associated for animation, he's got the event listener for keys and joysticks and such. Now I can just kind of, with a couple lines of code, load that tiled map, find that hero, assign the hero class to him, and be playing a game. So that's kind of my goal to get this to. I think once we get done doing a couple of games with these libraries, they'll be useful enough, and have enough different use cases kind of pushed through them that they'll be useful to people other than just us. They won't be internal libraries anymore. They'll be stuff that we can kick out to other people.
Well, okay. So you did the Mimic. That was the Ludum Dare, and that's. Are you going to release that as a game? Do you think that you'll finish it? Or is it just kind of a fun project?
Yeah, we're talking about it right now. So we've had some people contact us about kind of finishing it and releasing it as a game. We're kind of just weighing our options as far as, does it make more sense to continue with Time Golf Squad, which is, kind of feature complete and needs some content done, do we, try to do something like Mimic, which with the randomly generated levels, we can kind of build a lot more content for quicker. So, and it really, one of these things of doing the game jams is you get a bunch of feedback, right? So, people play the game, they say if they like it or don't like it, they rate it. And it's really getting people to rate your prototypes. So if we find a lot of people like it and people are willing to do it, I think no matter what, we'll probably put both Time Golf Squad and the Mimic up on Steam Greenlight, again, just to see if people like it. Because you'd hate to spend all this time building a game that people don't like. So, game jams.
You hate to spend a lot of time doing anything that people don't like.
Yeah, that's true.
And I guess that was my next question is, Golf Squad, when will it be released, and when can we expect to see it, and all that?
Yeah, my hope is that it's all done and ready to go before the end of the year. So that would be, yeah. And our plan, and I don't know if anybody else, have another whole topic of discussion over the business side of it, but I really want to start developing more for PC and Mac, and kind of quickly finding out whether the ideas work through doing game jams, then going on Steam Greenlight, see if there's interest there, and thinking about mobile and thinking about mobile last rather than mobile first.
Mike, that's an excellent point you made. You inferred, however you want to say it, but using a game jam as a platform for determining whether your idea has any merit within the community's mind, right? It's like you make a game in a vacuum and you go, I love my game. I got to get people to test it. That's real hard. Go to a game jam, you're going to have people playing it.
Yeah. And so Time Golf Squad came out of a game jam game called Wasteland Golf that we did that Game Jolt featured on their front page, and we got, somewhere around 5,000 downloads, something like that, or 5,000 page views on it. It's pretty close to being 5-star rated. Had a lot of people kind of interested in it, and so that's one of the reasons why we said, oh, well, this should go on our schedule. This should be something that we produce. Because, the same kind of thing, we spent, 48, 72 hours on it, and it was something that people kind of liked. Mimic feels kind of the same. I think we have about 250, 300 downloads on Game Jolt right now without any sort of feature. And outside of all the bugs that we released it with, generally positive feedback. So that would be another one that I would say, okay, this kind of goes on our docket of something to do. But yeah, really kind of, and plus our company does contract work. That's 99% of our revenue comes from other people hiring us to make games for them. And so we have to make sure that we can squeeze those in too. So yeah, it's really tough to kind of, come up with a methodology that allows you to just say, okay, hey, listen, this is a game that we're going to go make happen, because it is such a time commitment to do. And when we're working on our own games, we're not generating revenue for the company on the whole.
Gotcha. All right. So along those lines, while we're waiting for the Mimic and Golf Squad to hit the shelves, virtual shelves, then where should people go to find and see your work?
Ponywolf.com.
Okay.
So that's the easiest. And we have our game section there. If you want to play our games, it does us better if you download them from itch.io or GameJolt. So we like to climb up the ladders there. And then we have, legacy stuff out on mobile, Fraud Tycoon, Tiltable, stuff like that. That's kind of, good visions in how we game design, not necessarily great visions on, kind of our current coding structure.
All right. Okay. There you go. Then everyone should go to ponywolf.com and check out Michael's work. And you guys have done a great job, I think, on all of these. And I'm particularly excited to see Game Squad come out, or Golf Squad rather come out, and I did really enjoy playing the Mimic. So I enjoyed not just the gameplay, but the art style. I think the art style is, I don't know.
One thing I have nothing to do with.
Oh, come on, man! You get credit for everything.
Yeah, you get credit. Yeah, exactly.
Do the face.
Yeah, no, James is amazing. He's an excellent guy. I know I put this out to the crowd. So like if we were to do because we've done this before with some of his other arts, t-shirts and things like that, we've never really had any traction with it. But if people like that Mimic art style, it's pretty easy for us to spin up t-shirts if that's something that people are interested in. So I don't know if anybody else has any luck doing merchandise around any other gaming, but we haven't.
Well, here, since you brought it up, I want to put a quick poll out there just for the panel, just everybody here. What do you think about Amazon merch? Have you guys seen this?
I know what you said about it.
So Tony's shaking his head no. Michael says yes. Mike says no. Steven says no. Okay, and he's heard about it, but he doesn't know much about it. Right?
He doesn't know anything. He just knows what Charles says.
Yeah. So Amazon merch is print on demand t-shirts, and I think maybe other swag. But let's just focus on t-shirts just for a moment. And the idea here is that they actually have an SDK where you can imagine that you've got your custom player. You've got your high score moment, your hero shot or whatever, that you've just beat some level or raised some high score or smacked some player or whatever. And this is the moment you as the developer can push to the player a button that they could buy that t-shirt, get that image, that customized, whatever that is, that still frame that you give them. They could get that on a t-shirt. And then that t-shirt would be printed by Amazon and drop shipped directly to the customer. You wouldn't have to do any fulfillment, any order taking, anything. And there you go. I think this is a great idea. What do you guys think about that in concept? Would you be interested in that as a developer?
Yeah, I mean, it depends if it makes any money. Does anybody make any money off this?
Yeah, we haven't yet. I think we've sold a few shirts, and we've gotten people emailing us and saying, "Oh, I didn't think that the sizing was right or whatever." So it ends up being a little bit more of an opportunity, I guess, to interact with the community or people who like what you're doing. But
I love your positive spin. I love that.
Now, are these just T-shirts that you put up on Amazon, or are these through Amazon Merch?
These are through Amazon Merch, but we just didn't use the SDK. We just used the upload the image.
So you're manually creating the art, and then you're uploading them to the service, and then
it's the same deal. You
can
use it.
My what do we call that? Hypothesis is that people would be more invested in that moment where they're like, yeah, and then boom, here's the button. You're feeling so great about that. Why don't you get that on a T-shirt? Get it on a T-shirt.
So like if you had the high score and you show the high score with the character there, maybe that you built up over time. He has weapons that he's gotten.
Yeah, because you could take like a guns blazing moment, right, or something. I'm just trying to create a visual image here. You could take like the Mimic. He's going around shooting the alligators and stuff like that. So you could have that, and then you could do that art style where it's kind of like, and there's the character and he's like, and then you get the high score, and then it's like maybe there's some other like characters that are kind of off to the side, and then you're like, bam, there's the exclamation point, but it's in a visual form, and you get that on a T-shirt, and but it has your customized character, and it has your high score, and whatever you're compiling there as an image is sort of capturing that moment. I think that I just don't know. I think that it feels like that would be the perfect moment when the person's really at the height of their excitement. They could get it on a T-shirt. And that seems like that would be much better than just having a T-shirt that's available for the game in general.
And having it connected in-game, right, as opposed to having to send somebody off to your website to get it. Right. Seems like there's a lot less friction there to getting the sale.
Yeah, I'm not saying to you, hey, if you like the game, you should also get the T-shirt, right? I'm saying in that moment when you're most primed to be excited about whatever it is that's happening, there's an option for you to buy the T-shirt. And I'm not saying that everybody would take that advantage of that, but it just seems like that's in the world of me trying to express myself in a world of we're all trying to be different, the same. It just seems like that would be a way to kind of set yourself apart, and people would be like, "Ooh, where'd you get that T-shirt?" Or what is this T-shirt? Or that's a funny looking T-shirt. And then it would give them let me show you the app. I played this game and got the high score. I'd give them an excuse to talk about your game, to be a little bit of a marketing push.
Is Amazon Merch only for apps that are on Amazon, or is it for iOS apps too and stuff?
It's for everything. It's just print on demand. Basically, it's print on demand T-shirts. Right.
Is it just T-shirts? Is there any other stuff?
No matter where you're at.
Yeah, I don't remember. I didn't.
I don't think there's anything else but T-shirts right now.
Yeah. Oh. At GDC they had. I think I'll pull pictures and bring them back up to the top. But at GDC they had these big. It looks like a big printer. I mean, when the thing's moving back and forth, it says, it's just printing the T-shirt. And then the production guy takes it off the thing and he puts it on a dryer, and it runs through this heater that basically sets the ink on the T-shirt, and then it's ready to go. And the production guy that I talked to said they can go from digital asset to printed T-shirt in 20 minutes. And so I know when you go to Cafe Press or any of these other venues, you have to price the shirt like it turns out to be like a $30 T-shirt, right? So that you can make a few nickels on your end, and it just seems like a better option, more excitement. Being able to tie it directly to an emotional state. I don't know.
Yeah, I think $15 we make like $4 a shirt, like $3 and change a shirt.
Yeah,
that's not bad. I was going to say is with Charles, you're in your moment. You order your T-shirt, play your game for 20 more minutes, and you get an email saying your T-shirt's on the way.
See, I'm telling you, man, end to end, that moment of just like, and then you give them a way to share that on social media. I got this T-shirt, my T-shirt's on its way. I mean, I don't know.
I got a mug with me.
Yeah.
I think the problem with that is there's one is I think it only work for certain types of games where.
Well, the first T-shirt is free, and then it's $19.99 after that.
But I think it will only work for certain types of games that kind of lend themselves to that idea. Yeah. But I think you're right. The other problem I have with that is that you have to convince them. It has to be so. They have to be so into that moment to convince them to spend the money, because obviously everybody always wants to beat that score again. Like they want to get that next better score. So 10 minutes later or tomorrow they could beat that score, and then they're like, well, crap, yesterday
then they can get another T-shirt.
Well, just don't.
And now I have a better score, but like now that, what am I going to do? Buy another T-shirt?
You're gonna have to get
Buy
another
another
T-shirt.
one.
Yeah.
That's where the real money comes in.
Yeah, they need to sell, I think they need to sell coffee mugs and everything else like Cafe Press. Really make this work.
Yeah, it'd be cool if they had more products, because that seems like then you could scale it a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe, I'm using the high score example. So yeah, maybe there are holes in the methodology there. But maybe if it's just not even that, it's a like, again, because I'm picturing a compilation. I'm talking about just a flat screenshot. I'm talking about you're taking this customized character with some kind of pose and some kind of, like you're like smacking them together into this composite, and then you're like, here it is, here's the moment, right? So it could be like a great job or a yeah, or whatever. It doesn't have to be tied to a number, but if you felt like
it would be something that would be like you're saying, it wouldn't have to be tied to a number, so it wouldn't run into Mike's issue.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a jet. I got to go get some heat and put it on my house. So.
Well, this has been an excellent session. So I'm going to, again, remind everybody to go to ponywolf.com and check out everything that Michael's got going on there. And we've got him on record as saying that he could do 3 whole shows on Tiled. And so we're going to hook that up at some point. It may take us a year and a half to get those 3 shows out the door, but I'm going to hound him until his dying breath.
So you latched onto that too, huh?
I did.
I really do. I will do my best to make it happen, because I do think that, even if without any libraries or any of that other kind of stuff, just looking at the output from Tiled as JSON, and also outputs Lua files. So just a regular Lua table with just an image and the X and Y location. But that stuff is gold for laying out user interface, laying out anything that's kind of graphics based. So,
all right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for hanging out for 2 hours and 15 minutes. You are all awesome. You're all superstars.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you guys next time.
All righty. Bye.